Hi everybody, it's me, the Fetch, host of Inside the Eye Live. Before the Sunday mainstream media political pundit talk shows, there is Inside the Eye Live, where we break down some of the weekly mainstream media talking points before the talking points even get aired. Add in some entertaining stories, weather, cats, intriguing and informative guests, and you get one of the most listened to Saturday morning streaming media political talk shows going today. And it's all right here on our flagship station, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. So join me, the Fetch, for Inside the Eye Live every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern. It is truly intelligent media for the politically aware.
Welcome to Sacred Matrix, a divine paradigm of love and universal consciousness, with your host, Janet Kira Lessin and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Together, we transform the world.
And now, here are your hosts, Janet Kira and Dr. Sasha Lessin.
Host Dr. Sasha Lessin, and today we have Dr. Michael Salla, who is an internationally recognized scholar in international politics, conflict resolution, and U.S. foreign policy, and has taught at universities in the USA and Australia. He is more popularly known as a pioneer in the development of exopolitics, the study of the main actors, institutions, and political processes associated with extraterrestrial life. Dr. Salla wrote the first published book in exopolitics in 2004 and followed this with another examining exopolitics in U.S. foreign policy in 2009. He authored Galactic Diplomacy in 2013, and this was followed by Kennedy's Last Stand, also 2013. Boy, he's a prolific writer, which investigated the relationship between classified UFOs and the Kennedy Assassination. In 2015, he authored Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. And let's see, this is... we're going to be talking about the U.S. Navy's Secret Space Program and Nordic-Extraterrestrial Alliance Secret Space Programs, Book 2. And let me tell you a little bit about it. The Los Angeles air raid on February 24th and 25th, 1942, opened up an unprecedented chapter in the evolution of the U.S. Navy. In response to this incident, a covert research program to investigate the feasibility of exotic anti-gravity propulsion technologies was developed. In addition, Navy operatives were embedded in Nazi-occupied Europe to learn about the Germans' advanced flying saucer programs, and they discovered the Nazis were receiving assistance from two extraterrestrial groups with very different agendas. The briefing of the operatives took place at Naval Air Station San Diego, led by Rear Admiral Rico Boda. He instructed a disseminator of naval research and information, William Tompkins, to take confidential briefing packets to select think tanks, corporations, and university departments around the country. Later, Tompkins worked with a number of leading aerospace companies to design massive spacecraft for a secret U.S. Navy space program, which was faithfully assisted by extraterrestrial visitors described as Nordics. And an extensive number of documents substantiate Tompkins' claim of the existence of a covert Navy program created to study, design, and build deep space battle groups. They became operational in the 1980s. Now the Navy has a new goal to enact a plan to level the universal playing field, and the election of President Donald Trump may just be the wild card they need to reveal everything. Dr. Lessin, what would you like to say before we bring on Dr. Michael Salla?
Well, this is stuff that's going to look a little bit behind the curtain of the media draws across what's really going on. So last time my mind was blown, we had an interview where we talked about the long suppressed role of Dracos in our evolution and their hybrids and the effect that these have had on right to this day. And so I'm breathless waiting for the next installment. What's really going on?
And Michael, Dr. Salla, the last show was on a different network, so don't be afraid to repeat yourself because this is a whole new audience. But everybody really wants to know this information. This is critical to our times and the evolution of our consciousness. So please welcome to our show. Thank you for coming on Sacred Matrix.
Thanks for having me, Janet and Sasha. I'm really looking forward to this. And there's really an incredible amount of information that now is openly available for people to scrutinize and make sense of what's been going on. For me, this is like looking at a huge jigsaw puzzle and finally being able to make out the edges of that puzzle with the information that's recently come out from Corey Goode and William Tompkins.
Yes, so could you give our listeners a little bit of a background of what's going on right now, especially Antarctica, and the information that William Tompkins brought forth in his new book, Selected by Extraterrestrials? Like, who is William Tompkins? Who is Corey Goode? And why is their information so critical in these times?
Right. Well, William Tompkins, he is very important because he has come forward to reveal the existence of a Navy espionage program that was run throughout the Second World War, where the Navy had 29 spies embedded in Nazi-occupied Europe and were bringing back a lot of intelligence about the Nazis' top aerospace programs and what the Nazis were doing not only in Europe but in Antarctica as well when it came to developing flying saucer craft. So the Navy spies brought back all this intelligence, and there were debriefings held at the Naval Air Station in San Diego. And William Tompkins, his job at the time was to listen to these spies' debriefings and to then put together briefing packets based on what the spies had told him and the admiral and the Navy captains that were assembled there, and to then take that information to different think tanks, to different aerospace companies, to different university departments, to see if any of the scientists, any of the engineers could make sense of what the Nazis were up to. Because each of these spies had a little bit of the puzzle, what the Nazis were doing. And so Tompkins' job was to kind of keep track of everything that the Nazis that the Navy spies had brought back, and to put together these packets so that whatever studies, whatever reverse engineering projects had to be put together could move forward based on accurate intelligence. So that was his job. And then after the Second World War, then he began working with several of the companies that had previously had access to these briefing packets. And so that's when he got to assist in the Navy putting together its own secret space program based on these debriefings.
Right, and I just watched, coincidentally, The Imitation Game. I don't know if you've ever seen that with Benedict Cumberbatch, but they had a device that the Nazis had, and I couldn't help but think it had to be extraterrestrials. It was a decoding mechanism that created, and I don't have the numbers, but hundreds of thousands of variables, and every midnight the code changed, so they couldn't begin to decipher what the Nazis were doing, and the Americans were losing the war. So I wonder if that was part of that alien technology, and of course Hollywood didn't know what to do with that information, so they didn't really get in behind it. They just realized they had this technology that was, hundreds of years in advance of what the society was at the time. So what was it? Started in the Los Angeles air raid in February 24th and 25th in 1942. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about that? What was going on in this air raid that it was so? Do you have any more information on what that actually was, who that was, what that was about?
Sure. Right. Right. Well, that happened in the evening of February 24th, 20, and 25th of 1942, when there were a number of UFOs that began flying over Los Angeles, and the Army unleashed an artillery barrage that lasted several hours. Thousands of shells were launched at these UFOs, which appeared at some points to just hover over Los Angeles. The Navy also had warships at Long Beach there, and they also opened up their artillery on these flying saucers or these UFOs. And what happened was that as essentially the only damage that was done to the city was from the artillery shells, when they landed back in the residential areas, that these craft, whatever they were, they weren't hostile. They were just floating over the city. And previously, there was a thought that, well, maybe this was a kind of nefarious Japanese attack or something. But, with these craft not performing any kind of hostilities, and the fact that they hovered for several hours showed that these were some kind of non-terrestrial technology. We're talking about some extraterrestrials that were basically just hovering over Los Angeles. And what we know from majestic documents and from what William Tompkins has revealed is that two of these objects were retrieved after the incident. Now, there's a debate whether or not, these objects were shot down or whether or not they were just some kind of a gift or allowed to just be, shot down by the extraterrestrials. But once the Army, Air Force, and the Navy got their hands on these recovered flying saucers, these were unmanned vehicles. Basically, they were sent off to the various laboratories that the Army and the Navy had to study foreign technologies. And the Army's premier institute for studying foreign technologies at the time, and even today, was Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio. And so that's where the UFO was shipped to. Now, on the very day of that incident, one of the Navy's top engineers received orders to travel out to Wright Field. And this is the same man that William Tompkins says later ran the Navy espionage program out of Naval Air Station to spy on the Germans' UFO program. And his name was Rick Oboda, and he became a rear admiral during the war. And he was the one that really kind of got the US started in firstly understanding, what flying saucer technologies the Germans were working on, what they were developing in occupied Europe and Antarctica, and then helped the Navy put together its own program to reverse engineer these technologies and eventually build their own flying saucers in the future.
It just dawned on me that Sasha was alive and in the LA area during this event. Did you? You would have been 2 years old. Did you remember your dad or anybody in your family talking about this at all?
No.
Okay, we'll just move past that. I just thought I'd ask. I never thought about it until I just read that. Okay, so Tompkins then got very involved in all this, information with the Nazis and everything. Basically, from what I understand from the book, what was it called? Selected by Extraterrestrials, Tompkins said, and I'm paraphrasing him, and then correct me if I'm wrong, that the U.S. was basically going to lose the war because the Nazis had advanced technologies that were hundreds of years beyond ours, and there was no way to defeat them. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, and correct me if I'm wrong or make adjustments to what I just said?
Well, yes, certainly the Nazis were given quite a number of extraterrestrial technologies that they were trying to reverse engineer for the war effort. But what happened was that the Nazis simply ran out of time. That because these flying saucer technologies used very different physics principles to conventional kind of weapons, it meant that you couldn't simply stick a cannon or any kind of a rocket on a flying saucer, because a flying saucer uses torsion fields and anti-gravity fields with high electromagnetic charges and spinning plasma. These are the kind of principles that flying saucers use, but that's not something that you can simply stick a cannon on a flying saucer. They are really incompatible, and that's what the Nazis tried to do, and they just simply ran out of time. Eventually, after the war, this is by 1947, the Nazis that had safely hidden or built bases in Antarctica had the time to be able to finally develop directed energy weapons. And so now with directed energy weapons, these flying saucers could be used for offensive or defensive military activities. But during the Second World War itself, the Nazis were unsuccessful in achieving that. If they had, then they definitely would have won the war. But luckily, they didn't.
Right. Do you have any questions or feedback? Okay. So then we get all these Nazi scientists. Can you tell us about Project Paperclip and why we ended up with all these people in the U.S. and how they got involved in our space program, the public space program and the secret space program?
Sure. Well, towards the end of the Second World War, when it became clear that the Nazis were going to lose the war, then a lot of deals were made. Alan Dulles, he was the Office of Strategic Service official in charge of their Bern office in Switzerland, and he was the guy that really helped put together a number of agreements whereby in return for surrendering, some of the top Nazis would be allowed safe passage out of Europe. Some of them would be allowed, if they had something to contribute, to enter into the US and to join the US, the future space program. And so that's where you had a lot of scientists entering the United States. Some of them went down to Redstone Arsenal, White Sands Proving Ground to work on rockets that would eventually be used for developing NASA rockets and for ballistic missiles. Other scientists were sent to Wright Field to basically do research on flying saucer technologies. These were the people that had an advanced understanding of torsion field physics and also high voltage electrostatics, that these were people that could help the US develop its own fleets of flying saucer craft. One of the scientists that went to Wright Field was Winifred Otto Schumann, who's better known as the scientist who developed the Schumann resonance. But in the 1920s, he worked with Maria Orsic and the Vril Society in developing the very first Vril prototypes. These were the very first flying saucers developed in modern history, and these were done in Germany while it was the Weimar Republic. So this is pre-Nazi Germany. And the intention at the time was that these flying saucers would be developed for mass use for civilians. So it was kind of like a civilian program, which was really designed to kind of like help people develop the kind of scientific know-how for building these craft themselves. And obviously it wasn't something that took all the resources of a state. It really just took people, technically sophisticated enough and had access to sufficient equipment to be able to build these flying saucers. Nikola Tesla was involved in all of this. Maria Orsic, Guglielmo Marconi was also involved. So in the 1920s, and early 1930s, before the Nazis came to power, it really was a time when there was a possibility that humanity could go out to the stars because civilians were building these advanced kind of flying saucer technologies in Germany. But then the Nazis came to power, and essentially they took it all over. And then after the war, every major scientist or engineer who had know-how on these things, they were anxious to leave Germany because Germany was being carved up and it was going to go through very difficult times. And many of them were eager to go to the United States and continue working on these projects.
Do you have any idea which extraterrestrials were giving us this advanced technology, giving it through the Germans, and what was their motivation for doing so? Any insight on that?
Yes. The first group that were helping Maria Orsic and the Vril Society, we would regard them today as a benevolent group. They were a Nordic group of extraterrestrials. They said that they came from Aldebaran. And there was also human-looking extraterrestrials from an inner Earth civilization, the Thulians, that were also involved in passing on this information to Maria Orsic. And so they were a very positive group, and they really thought that by giving this kind of technology to these German civilians that were interested in occult metaphysics and trying to combine that with science, they could help humanity kind of have a quantum leap in consciousness. So their intentions to begin with were very good. What happened, though, was that in 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power, and he was working with kind of dark magic, or a very negative group of occultists, and what he tried to do was to put all of this under the control of the Nazi state. And eventually he made agreements with another group of extraterrestrials, which are the reptilians, the Draconians, and the Draconians helped Hitler's Nazi party in establishing bases in Antarctica, where the Nazis would now work very closely with the reptilians who had nearby bases, and essentially this is where the Nazis their connection with the Nordic or the human-looking extraterrestrials pretty much came to an end. The Nordics realized what was going on, and that Hitler and the Nazis were very firmly embedded with the reptilians, and so they began then to help the Allied powers. And so that's when you had the same group of extraterrestrials that were earlier helping Maria Orsic and the Vril Society had now shifted over, and they were helping the Allied powers in the war effort. Not that they wanted the Allies to develop advanced technologies. They were very concerned about the Allies using extraterrestrial technologies for war, for weapons programs, but they helped them enough to be able to neutralize anything that the Nazis were doing with the assistance of the reptilians.
Is there any historical records that you might have encountered or that document how they came to introduce themselves to humanity, both the reptilians and the Vril Society? Was there some kind of meeting arranged? Who first met them and how? Any records on that or information?
Right. Well, William Tompkins talks about that. He says that the Navy spies were coming back, and they began talking about these reptilian consultants who were helping Nazi scientists in their weaponization programs, and that they spoke also about agreements that had been reached between the Nazis and the reptilians. So that was the information they were bringing back. They didn't have access to any documents themselves, but certainly the debriefings of these Navy spies were part of the historical record that has since become highly classified. And later on, Corey Good says that from the year 2017 from the year 1987 up until 2007, that he had access to these smart glass pads, kind of similar to an iPad, but only transparent, kind of like that was developed and in use in the secret space programs in the 1980s, and that he, through reading these smart glass pads, was able to read about these agreements that the Nazi Germany had reached with the reptilians. So certainly there are documents that are out there that are part of the official records that have been used in the programs, but I haven't seen any myself that have been leaked so far that we can say definitively this actually is a historical document showing, telling us about Hitler reaching agreements with reptilians.
And so then that brings to mind, who are the Greys and what's their role in all of this? We have the Eisenhower met the Greys and the Nordics in the 50s. Were they involved in this first part in World War II or pre-World War II?
Well, certainly after World War II, they were definitely a part of events as they transpired. We know, for example, the 1947 Roswell crash, that involved grey extraterrestrials, that there have been quite a number of witnesses that have described the greys that were retrieved. And according to the various whistleblowers and contactees that I've been interviewing, they have said that basically the greys are working with the reptilians, that the reptilians, it's kind of like in terms of the hierarchy of the negative extraterrestrial groups, the reptilians are pretty high up in the hierarchy. The draconians, they're right up there, and they're followed by kind of insectoid races, the praying mantis, and then you have the grey extraterrestrial races, the tall greys, and then at the bottom of that extraterrestrial hierarchy, you have the 3 foot, 4 foot tall short greys, who seem to be kind of like almost like automatons that they kind of artificially created to perform kind of various functions that the reptilians want done. So the greys are part of this reptilian Nazi alliance that was formed during the Second World War, and ever since the Second World War has been gradually infiltrating the U.S. military-industrial complex.
Sasha, say something.
This is totally fascinating. It's
come closer to the mic.
Yeah. What about the good guys that are versus the bad guys in the internal fight within our own services? Is anyone trying to preserve us? And is there anyone that wants disclosure to allow us to have the energy systems and medicines that could be available if we had the alien technology available to the civilian population?
Sure. Actually, that's a very good question, Sasha. Because there is a historical timeline here in terms of the development of two secret space programs by various military services. The U.S. Air Force began, and the U.S. Navy began together out of a study group that was formed out of the Douglas Aircraft Company just towards the end of the Second World War, that became known later as Project RAND. Officially, Project RAND began in October of 1945, but according to William Tompkins, Project RAND began a lot earlier, and it involved Navy admirals and Army Air Force generals, along with Douglas Aircraft Company senior scientists, all working together to try and understand the extraterrestrial technologies. What happened after the war was that Project RAND continued for 3 years under the auspices of Douglas Aircraft Company, but then there was a separation, and essentially part of Project RAND went to form a new company called the RAND Corporation, and that was entirely funded by the U.S. Air Force. and helped the Air Force in developing its secret space program in alliance with the Greys, the reptilians, and the Nazis, because agreements were reached in the 1940s with them, and the RAND Corporation kind of like facilitated the information flow so that the Air Force could eventually develop its own secret space program in the 70s and 80s. At the same time, the Navy stayed working with the Douglas Aircraft Company and set up its own secret space program, but this was done in alliance with the Nordic extraterrestrials. So since the 1950s, early 1950s, well, even the latter part of the 1940s, under James Forrestal, the U.S. Navy has been assisted and has been collaborating with this Nordic extraterrestrial race in developing a secret space program. And that throughout the 1950s and 60s, William Tompkins talks about his own role in this collaboration between the Nordic extraterrestrials and the Navy, that the Nordics actually had some of their people infiltrate top aerospace companies, and that these Nordic infiltrators would basically help the scientists and the engineers in developing the kind of advanced technologies that would be necessary for a future space program that the Navy planned to put together. So essentially what happened was that as a result of the assistance that the Navy was getting from the Nordic extraterrestrials, by the early 1980s, the Navy started to deploy these huge mile-long battle groups, space battle groups, kind of like an aircraft carrier battle group on the high seas. Well, you had the same thing in space, where the Navy now had these space battle groups that could deploy in deep space and could even go into other solar systems if there was a need. And this was all done with the cooperation of the Nordics, while the Air Force at the same time was closely collaborating with the reptilians, the grey extraterrestrials, and the Nazis. And so so the U.S. Military has been historically very much divided along these parallel routes of developing these kinds of advanced technologies.
Wow. What you're saying is exactly parallel. The case that Wes Penray reports about one of the Nordics who came down, and it was giving major help to not only to our technology, but he let himself be tested, and his IQ was off the charts. He could lift 400 pounds bench press, and he was having monoatomic gold and platinum all the time. Just it seems to be part of their pattern. So the way you're putting it out is consistent with some other information that I've been looking at too.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, this has been going on for a long time because I think when we look at all of this information, when we develop an overview of it all, it's quite clear that different extraterrestrial groups have been having galactic conflicts for a long time, and that we on Earth are at this kind of critical point in our history in terms of becoming a spacefaring world, and so the different nations and even the different military services within a major nation like the United States, that we're used as proxies in this kind of galactic war.
Right. Now, I have a couple questions. The tall whites and the all different human species. Are they differences or the tall whites?
All right, I'm trying to get everybody back. I'm not sure what happened.
Hello?
Yeah, me and you are back, but they're not back yet.
Oh, okay. I got a landline, maybe because Janet cut out. I couldn't
There
hear
we go.
anything.
Janet's back now.
Yeah, we got booted. I don't know if you heard the last question. I don't know what you were saying. So anyway, we missed about 5 minutes or something. I was asking about the difference or the similarities between the Greys, the Anunnaki, between the tall whites, the Nordics, the Anunnaki, Pleiadians, all the ones that look human. Can you help us sort all that out a little bit? Who are these people?
Sure. Okay. Well, when it comes to the human-looking extraterrestrials, there's quite a range of them, and they cover different solar systems, and genetically there are some kind of major differences, and apparently, according to models, these human-looking extraterrestrials have been responsible for the major racial subgroups on our world, and that they're running 22 different genetic long-term experiments, that these have been going on for somewhere in that 400,000 to 500,000 year range. So when you look at all of the racial subgroups on our world, each of these can be traced to one particular extraterrestrial group whose genetics are kind of more disposed to that. So for example, like the Northern Europeans, they are kind of more closely related to the Lyrans or to the Pleiadians. When you look at say the Native Americans of the Americas, they might be more related to, say, the Sirius star system, and the, say, Mediterranean peoples, that they're connected genetically to the Tausetians, and so on. You kind of get an idea of the racial differences here. As far as kind of political differences, the tall whites they are a group that are a part of this kind of Nazi, reptilian, U.S. Air Force and Grey extraterrestrial alliance. As far as I can tell, the tall whites, based on the writings of Charles Hall, are a form of grey hybrids or tall grey hybrids. They kind of are very enigmatic and certainly not a friendly group, as I would consider the Nordic extraterrestrials who have been helping, who have been having the contacts with the, like people like George Adamski and Howard Menger and so forth. These were very friendly Nordic-looking extraterrestrials. I would not consider the tall whites to be in that category. And as for the Anunnaki, well, people are all over the map on that one, in terms of the Anunnaki being, very tall, sturdy, human-looking extraterrestrials, or some of them being reptilians even. So, but definitely the Anunnaki are a group of extraterrestrials that are part of our historical development.
Part of these tall Nordic-type races have normal skulls, and some have the elongated skulls. Can you tell us about those differences? What do you know? Right.
Well, some of those with the long skulls, Homo capensis, I think, is the kind of anthropological term for those beings. Some of these have been very prominent in our history. According to Corey Good, he says that a group of these long skull beings, or the Homo capensis, they crash landed on Antarctica around 50 to 60,000 years ago, and that they then set about establishing colonies in other parts of the planet, where they put hybrids that they created, put them in positions of power, and over millennia, these hybrid rulers became the kind of ruling bloodlines of those different colonies around the world. And what happened was about 13,000 years ago, there was an event, a global event, the flood, the Great Flood, where there was a pole shift. And what happened was that the main base of these elongated skull beings, Corey calls them the pre-Adamites. So the pre-Adamites, their main base was in Antarctica. These beings were around 12 to 14 foot tall. Very thin bodies. Their bodies had evolved largely on Mars and on the Moon. So they were used to lower gravity environments, so the Earth's gravity was a bit too harsh for them. So they had to be near their ships. But they were able to develop hybrids who had the same long skulls but weren't quite as tall. So, the hybrids might have been like 8 foot tall, something like that. And these hybrids were put in these positions of authority around the world. So with this pole shift that happened about 13,000 years ago, now all of a sudden Antarctica, which was the main hub for this elongated skull civilization, is now in the South Pole, and the ice quickly forms over all of the kind of civilization that had been established in Antarctica, and this gets buried, and the long elongated skulls, or the pre-Adamites, that they had to withdraw into their motherships that were still functional, even though they couldn't fly anymore. They were still functional. They had power, and the technology was still working. So they had to withdraw to their motherships, and basically went into stasis chambers. And it's inside of these stasis chambers that they've survived up until the present day. They were essentially kind of sociopaths. They treated the human population at the time similar to the way we treat dogs, as kind of pets that you breed for a specific function. So they certainly weren't a very friendly race, and they certainly didn't view humans as innately kind of like worth too much. They treated us like we treat pets, and of course, we can treat pets quite benignly, or we can treat them quite cruelly. But essentially, there is no kind of human rights charter for pets. So that's quite notable to keep in mind.
Wow. So these pre-Adamites went out, and they're still walking among us, these hybrids, correct? And are they able to breed with normal?
Well, currently,
go ahead.
Yes. They're like the hybrids, the pre-Adamite hybrids. They were created so that they could breed with humans, so that they could maintain their bloodlines, and so that's why they try to breed within the bloodlines, but they are capable of interbreeding with humans, and they've been doing this for thousands of years. And so, as you can imagine, the bloodlines over time gets diluted, but the ones that survive today, they operate behind the scenes. They are kind of very prominent in the Vatican, because the Vatican provides them a means of being able to hide, especially the Jesuits, because of the kind of the mitres that they wear over their head. So for these elongated skulls, the Homo capensis, these mitres are able to cover their heads. This is something that a World Bank whistleblower by the name of Karen Hudes has talked about at length, about how the Homo capensis are hidden within the Catholic Church hierarchy, and in particular the Jesuits. And so the Jesuits really are a very important part of how these ruling bloodlines are able to maintain their power globally, because the Jesuits and the Catholic Church truly is a global movement. It has outposts in virtually every country on the planet.
So these are mainly hidden in the Catholic Church. How do they find Do they live extremely long lives? How do they find partners to have children with? I mean, if you have a large head like that,
Or
how
if
do
you're
you
a priest.
and you're a priest, how do you find partners to continue your species? Do you have any idea? I
Right.
was just thinking that we were talking.
Right. Well, they've been doing this for since 60,000 years ago. That these hybrid families, hybrid rulers were created, and they were able to interbreed with the local human population. So I imagine that there would probably have been advanced technologies that could have been used, kind of like in vitro fertilization, where you could inseminate a woman with the genetics of both. You could probably have even kind of interbreeding in the normal way, and whatever other way in which they could propagate their species. I imagine now, given the passage of time, that they would probably be able to breed the normal way. That they're much taller than us, but now not that much taller. So some of these Homo capensis might be like 7 foot tall or something like that. So that's more than capable of breeding with a normal human female. But as we know from the research of others who have been trying to understand the way in which the bloodlines operate, they do pay close attention to the bloodline, that they just don't marry anyone. They don't marry for love as we do. There's a compatibility in terms of bloodline and in terms of families and so forth. So that way, because they're concerned, the ruling bloodlines, they want to keep their bloodline as pure as possible, so that eventually, when the original Homo capensis, or the pre-Adamites, re-emerge from their stasis chambers in Antarctica, that they will have enough followers to kind of establish hegemony again on the planet.
Wow. Sasha, question, feedback. Come on, get over here.
No, it's just a mind blow. They're in stasis. Do they have any of their leaders that aren't in stasis? That's
right.
Who's making decisions for them?
Well, it must be the Vatican, right? But are there?
And the Jesuits are supposed to be having like a war against Pope Francis.
Oh, yeah.
Well, yeah, there is definitely battles between the different bloodlines now, because it's not just that the pre-Adamites are the ones that were calling all the shots, because there were other extraterrestrial groups here. As I mentioned, they've been running 22 different genetic experiments for hundreds of thousands of years. You've had reptilians here who have also their own bloodlines that they've kind of nurtured. So there's been competition between these ruling elites behind the scenes. Now, as to the question of the original pre-Adamites, those that originally came from Mars and landed in Antarctica, none of them, as far as I know, are walking around. They're all in stasis chambers in Antarctica because they had to withdraw to their ships, because they always needed the advanced technologies of their ships to be able to survive on Earth, because Earth's environment or Earth's gravity is too strong for them. So they're in stasis chambers, and but the ones that were the hybrids, I mean, they were genetically engineered so that they could withstand Earth's stronger gravity field, but they had the intelligence, and they had the kind of height and some of the physical characteristics of the original pre-Adamites, so that the hybrids really are kind of like another species of humans. But of course they're well hidden, and
how can they be brought out of stasis? Is that a known technology, and who makes those decisions? What's happening on that?
Right. Well, they couldn't be brought out of stasis up until recently, because essentially the motherships, which were miles long, were buried under thousands of feet of ice in Antarctica. But what's recently been happening is the Antarctic ice shelf is starting to melt, that there's a lot of thermal activity that's being generated underneath Antarctica, because it's still highly volcanic, and so there's a lot of thermal activity coming up, and it's melting the ice shelf from underneath, which means that the craft, the miles-long craft that was originally under thousands of feet of ice, is now in this huge cavern, because the ice around it has been melted, and there's a huge cavern where the cavern still has ice going up thousands of feet. But now what they can do is that they can drill through the ice and access these motherships, and they can do the same thing to access the ancient civilization that the pre-Adamites created, which appears to be connected in a profound way with Atlantis. So we can kind of like say that Atlantis has been discovered in Antarctica. So what's happening now in Antarctica is that there's a big race between all the different nations, the major nations that have kind of bases and operations in Antarctica, because each one has different ruling bloodlines that influence it. So the Russians, they're doing their experiments. They're drilling deep into Antarctica so that they can gain access to these pre-Adamite ruins. Same with the Americans, same with the British. The Australians are doing the same. The Chileans and the Argentinians are doing the same thing. So there really is a race down there in Antarctica to find as many of these ancient artifacts as possible, and to kind of like decide what to do with these pre-Adamites that have been discovered in their miles-long motherships. So I don't believe that they've been awoken yet. But it's very possible that they could awaken soon, or one of the governments awakens them, or one of the bloodline families awakens them, which is probably more likely to be the case, because the thing is, these pre-Adamites, the ones that are working with the Vatican, that are a part of the major religious communities, these are the guys that really worship the pre-Adamites, the original pre-Adamites that are in stasis. So there's a real chance that, what can happen. And it's quite interesting that the Russian Orthodox Patriarch Kirill went down to Antarctica, because he would be part of that group that would probably be quite happy to awaken these pre-Adamites from their stasis chambers, and to kind of like start worshiping them again, giving them power, and I think that's the danger we have from conventional religion, like the Roman Catholic Church, the Jesuits, possibly even the Orthodox Church, that they can play a prominent role in a reawakening of these stasis chambers of these pre-Adamites, and then basically facilitating their rise to positions of global dominance and authority.
Wow.
Well, we're coming up on a break. What would you like to cover in about 2 minutes here, and then we'll go and do part 2 after the break?
Sure. Well, I think there's a really kind of a lot of important things that are happening in Antarctica. John Kerry went there at the end of 2016 during the presidential election, and he was there during the actual voting as well. And I think that was because he had to go down there and basically negotiate with the ruling groups down in Antarctica in terms of what to do with the outcome of the U.S. election, which looked as though the writing was on the wall as far as Hillary Clinton was concerned, because she was being stopped from manipulating the election outcome and orchestrating a victory. And so she was stopped from doing that. So it became clear that Trump was going to win. And so I think Kerry had to go to Antarctica and kind of explain himself to the ruling elites down there, who had been told that Hillary would be allowed to win, and that she was basically controlled by the elite. And now they have Trump, and Trump's a wild card. No one knows what he's going to do.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk a little bit what we're going to cover when we come back. We're going to talk about the wild card Trump. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what Corey Good is bringing to the plate, and what else would you like to cover in the last hour after the break? Oh, right. Talk about that. We'll be back. Okay, listening to the Matrix on Ocean Radio. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Starting at 4 p.m. Thursday, January 19th until midnight, Friday, January 20th. Any donor of $50 or more will receive a seed pack with 16,500 seeds worth $150. All non-GMO heirloom vegetable seeds sponsored by the seed company Mike works for to provide the seed packs. Make sure when you're making the donation to include in the buyer's notes your address and note special seed promotion. Includes the following seeds. Speed it up for your time and convenience. Arugula, slow bolt, asparagus, Mary Washington, bean, blue lake bush, beets, Detroit dark red, broccoli, Carol Brazier, Brussels sprouts, Long Island, cabbage, red acre, cantaloupe, Hale's best jumbo, carrots, scarlet nantes, cauliflower, snowball white, celery, Utah, collards, Georgia southern, corn, delicious, cucumber, Boston pickling, eggplant, black beauty, honeydew, green flesh, kale, blue scotch curl, lettuce, butter crunch, lettuce iceberg, lettuce Paris Island, lettuce red romaine, okra, spineless, onion, yellow Spanish, pea, green arrow, pumpkin, Big Macs, radish, cherry bell. That's right. If you donate $50 or more, you get this seed pack free.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
You need some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable CNN network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons. Join us Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to noon Eastern Time at freedomslips.com at Revolution Radio. Our world team members are Dennis Fetcho, John Ilias, David Dunger, Halakas MD, Melanie Vrichton, Jim Mars, Paula Harris, John Trallo, Maria Payan, Christopher Husser, DODDS, Jonathan Orchard, and me, your anchor, Dr. Robin Falco.
If you decide not to volunteer, it will not be held against you in any way.
Sounds dangerous. It is. Very dangerous. Count me in.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps.
The Secret Society Revealed. With your host, Joseph Atwell, author of Caesar's Messiah, The Roman Conspiracy to Invent Jesus, and Shakespeare's Secret Messiah. the groundbreaking discoveries that gives us a new understanding of how governments and elites use mind control to manipulate their subjects. Join Mr. Atwell as he lifts the veils of deceptions of our modern world. Mondays, 12 noon Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Pacific Time on Revolution Radio.
And I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny. You've come to fight as free men. And free men you are. What will you do without freedom? Will you fight? We will run. And we will live. Aye. Fight and you may die. Run and you'll live. At least a while.
The future is uncertain. I know this. Death is inevitable. I know this. But one thing is certain. As free men, it is our right to live unencumbered and in peace. And those times are quickly drawing to an end. And in these times, peace is certainly an illusion. And as the chains grow tighter, our ability to slip those chains increase incrementally with every passing moment. Inaction is no longer an option. It's time to raise our voices like a cacophony of thunder and lightning and tell the masters no more. And this is Nighthawk, and I say, for myself, no more. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because the freedom is slipping away. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
You are live.
Oh, aloha and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. And I am your host, Janet Kara Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin, and we're talking to Dr. Michael Salla. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to the donation button on freedomslip.com and donate whatever you can. $1, $5, $15, $20, whatever you could donate is greatly appreciated, and we do thank you very much for your donation. Mad Painter, Thomas Becker, are there any specials, anything we need to tell our listeners?
No, ma'am, other than the fact I want to thank everybody for making sure that we started out this month in a good chunk already, and please donate.
Excellent. Okay, you had a question you wanted to, or subject you want to put on the
Well, yeah,
there?
for people that aren't familiar with the subject, how do we ever get to this thing about these runaway civilizations with corporate slave bases and good Marines versus bad Marines and all this stuff that's going on that where most of the money that's collected gets spent but nobody knows about except for the most clandestine of the clandestine. How do we get there and where are we and what are we going to do about it?
Oh, well, that's a challenging question there, Sasha. It's quite complex because essentially we need to look at how the space program's evolved with the Nazis being the first to get out there in space. The Nazis were the first to establish colonies on the moon, on Mars, and elsewhere in our solar system. And one of the things about the Nazi space program was that it used slave labor. That was a core principle of Nazi ideology, that they had no problem forcing people to work as slaves to do anything that was necessary. And we know during the Second World War that's what was happening with the V rockets, that they were using slave labor. The same thing was happening as the German space program took off and established all its colonies, that they would continue to use slaves, that they would get through any means. What happened, though, in the 1950s was that because there was agreements with the military-industrial complex of the US, that many elements of the US that had that kind of similar Nazi mindset or ideology now began working with the Nazis in their space program. So the Nazis got a major infusion of resources, people, and people that thought like them. So we're talking about a lot of people that industrialists, corporate executives that had a similar kind of hierarchical way of looking at the world. So as this kind of evolved over the decades, and the Nazi space program developed bigger ships, and U.S. corporations played a bigger role in secretly building these craft in places like Antarctica. And Antarctica has a number of major industrial bases where they have been building these spacecraft for the Nazi space program. In the United States, also they've got major corporate facilities where they build these craft for the Navy and for the Air Force, and that over time the corporations began building these craft for the cabal, the Illuminati. And these are the kind of the pre-Adamites, so that the people we've been talking about the pre-Adamite hybrids. That were the ruling elites behind the scenes. They wanted now this know-how, the ability to build spacecraft was something that was available to them again, because for thousands of years they had been cut off from all of that, because the main source of that kind of technological infrastructure was in Antarctica, but it was buried under ice. So the hybrids that were dispersed around the world in the different colonies were cut off from that advanced technology. So now in our modern age, with different corporations building these technologies again, these pre-Adamites basically had their own space program built, and this is called the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. And so that's a very powerful program, because these ruling bloodlines control the major corporations. Everyone knows that. And these ruling bloodlines cooperate with the Nazis as well, because they have a lot of things in common. Now, on the other hand, you have the military, you have the Air Force program, and you have the Navy program. Now, these are very different to the other programs. They have their own distinct approaches. The Air Force program is fairly heavily compromised in terms of their agreements with the Greys and the reptilians, and with the CIA and the elites. So they're fairly compromised, but not totally. According to the to the figures I've heard, it's something like I think kind of like half of the Air Force are compromised, whereas the other half are likely to kind of like side with the good guys. But with the Navy is predominantly kind of white hats. The Navy works much more with the Nordic extraterrestrials. The Marine Corps same thing. The Marine Corps also much more positive. So you have within the military, the U.S. military, this kind of cleavage or split between the different factions. So you can have good Marines, bad Marines, good Special Forces guys, bad Special Forces guys. So there's definitely some pretty big splits in terms of the factions.
Who are these the ruling elite, and how are they controlling our presidents and candidates like Hillary? Can you tell us a little bit about the politics?
Sure. Well, the politics, basically, President Kennedy was the last president who was not controlled by the cabal, the Illuminati. After Kennedy, every president up until Trump has been someone that could be controlled through a control file. In other words, any of these presidents between Kennedy and between Trump, there were things that they had done during their careers that could be used to blackmail them, if they weren't going to follow the orders that they were given, then they could be set up. So, for example, someone like Nixon, who knew a lot, he was set up, and so you had Watergate. Someone like Carter, who had a kind of independence streak and was becoming difficult to control, you had the Iranian hostage situation where essentially that was used to undermine him. And some of the presidents have been overtly working with the CIA, like the Bush family in particular. Both George Bush Sr., he was a former CIA operative, and his son, both his sons, all his sons actually are CIA assets. Obama also, he was controlled because there were things in Obama's past that could be used to undermine him. So Obama was very, very tightly controlled, as was Bill Clinton. Clinton especially, because Clinton, while he was governor of Arkansas, he was a major player in the drug trade that was flowing through Mena, Arkansas, coming from Colombia through Mena, Arkansas, and then being kind of diffused into the United States. So that was all of these planes of drugs were coming in through Mena, Arkansas, and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton were involved in all of that. That's how Bill Clinton showed that he could be a team player, that he could be trusted, and so they enabled him to become president. And they were doing this. They were planning to do the same thing with Hillary. Hillary, who also is deeply corrupt and is part of the kind of Illuminati system. She was supposed to win, and I think originally the plan was that Trump would be kind of like set up as the fall guy, that the plan was that Trump would win the Republican nomination, but then they had so many dirty secrets on Trump that they would air prior to the election that he was going to lose, and people would vote for Hillary, the lesser of two evils. That was the game plan, but something went wrong because no matter what scandal came out, people heard Trump talking about, groping women or kind of like him doing his trash talk or him kind of like speaking. All of these files that were being leaked about Trump would come out, and Trump would somehow survive that he would be able to kind of like get on top of that. You had a bunch of women coming forward saying that Trump had sexually harassed them. Just scandal after scandal. When Hillary and Trump were campaigning against one another, that a normal politician, would have just, his campaign would have imploded, but Trump didn't, and that was because people didn't trust the mainstream media anymore. This was the big turning point, that so many people were now going to alternative news sites to get their information. So they were going to Breitbart News, they were going to Infowars.com, they were going to WorldNet Daily, they were going to Coast to Coast AM, your show, places like my website. They were going to all of these places to get their information on what was really going on. So all of these scandals didn't sink Trump. And in a way, they helped him, because now people were convinced that that there was something was up, that the Trump campaign was being set up, and that the mainstream media were out to take Trump down. Well, Americans love supporting, like the outsider or the underdog, and Trump, as far as the major media was concerned, he was the underdog. He was the guy that was destined to lose. He didn't have a chance, but but it kind of backfired on them. And of course, we know Trump won, and that has created panic in the halls of the ruling elite, in the bloodline families, because Trump is not someone they control, and every trick that they've used to try to control him or undermine him has backfired. So they have no idea what's going to go on. But I think the big fear is that now the big secrets are starting to tumble out, and that they can't control it, and that's really got them scared.
Well, Michael, I'm always suspect of I don't think that anybody's out there that they don't want ultimately. So they probably have some ultimate agenda, and that's why he ended up winning. I think if they really did want him to win, he wouldn't have won. I don't know. I'm just suspect about the whole thing. I think it's going to come out within this year, maybe in the next few months. There's something underneath that maybe they really want Pence in there. There's something that's happening, and they can calculate 20 steps down the line into the future, and we have no idea what they're. But what I see is ultimately, if there's information out there or disinformation out there, the Illuminati wants it out somehow. Even our information, they're somehow using all of our alternative stories and ideas for their own higher agenda, and it unfolds and it blows my mind. So I don't trust any of this. So we'll see. But what were you going to say, Sash?
I don't remember when I heard this from you, Michael, or elsewhere, that somebody was saying that there was discussion among elements of the CIA and so forth about having to protect the president because plots were unfolding to have Trump assassinated so Pence could take over. And so it sounds like the kind of thing that Janet would hypothesize or speculate. But I think I heard it from somebody else. Have you heard anything like that? There was like the two branches of government, one that supports Trump and one that's opposed to him, and that they're really very much at drawn swords with each other.
And they have it on The Simpsons that Trump gets assassinated. Anyway, that's just a little aside. But what do you think about all this, Michael?
Sure. Actually, this is one of the things that I've been receiving some briefing material from Corey Good, who has been given some of this insider information from people involved with the Air Force Secret Space Program, and that he was told that prior to Trump winning the election, that there was a plan to basically have Trump removed, that he would actually be assassinated. That the plan was that he would be removed through some mechanism before the inauguration and even during the inauguration itself. That was the plan. But what happened was that the military, and as I mentioned, the Marine Corps, the U.S. Navy are the kind of major white hats when it comes to the military. The Army also is very supportive of the white hat agenda. So they basically told the Illuminati that if anything was done against Trump, that they would basically call out the troops and launch a military coup and surround the officers of the CIA, the NSA, Department of Homeland Security, and arrest everyone that had a role in the Trump assassination. So they threatened the kind of power elite, because the power elite operate through these kind of civilian intelligence organizations, and so that threat was made, and so they backed off, and so Trump was allowed to take the oath of office and is now president. But it was only because the military threatened a coup. And it's not the first time that this has happened. Back in the late 1950s, 1958, President Eisenhower threatened to invade Area 51 because he wasn't getting the intelligence he wanted from the CIA and the Majestic 12 group. And so he ordered for the information to be turned over. Otherwise, he would have the First Army that was based in Colorado invade Area 51. And apparently it got close to that actually happening. So it's not the first time that one branch of the U.S. military would be used as a lever to form other to force different bureaucracies in the United States to kind of like change their policies, and so that this happened again with Trump, and I think at the moment, there's a lot of white hats that are very supportive of Trump, because Trump, as is very obvious, he's very pro-military. He's giving the military everything that they want, and so the military are doing everything that they can to support Trump. Now, we as civilians that are interested in the truth coming out, what do we get out of this cooperation between Trump and the military? Well, I think what we get is that a lot of the military, they also want to be given access to these kinds of very advanced technologies. They have their own agendas, but essentially, I think for the military, the idea that these kinds of off-planet technologies are only kept for a select few is kind of like anathema to them. It kind of like they don't like that. They want that kind of technology become widely available, and so the military would really like to have something like a Star Trek society created. And if you remember Star Trek, and there's quite a story to tell there too, and I'll raise that a little bit later about the role Leslie Stevens and the U.S. Navy had in the creation of Star Trek, the series, the sci-fi series. I'll talk about that. So essentially, they wanted. Let me start then with Leslie Stevens. Leslie Stevens, he was the son. He was the producer of the creator of the Outer Limits, and he was the guy that helped Gene Roddenberry create the idea of Star Trek. And Leslie Stevens, he was the son of a Navy admiral, Vice Admiral Leslie Stevens, and Leslie Stevens, the Outer Limits creator, was also part of the U.S. Army's intelligence during the Second World War. So Leslie Stevens was part of the psychological warfare program that had been set up by the military as they were kind of like at the beginning of establishing their infrastructure and their national security policies on how to deal with all of these topics of extraterrestrial life, Nazis in Antarctica, and all of that. So Leslie Stevens basically fed Gene Roddenberry these ideas for a kind of Navy space program that would basically be established in the future. And of course, Leslie Stevens hypothesized that for the 23rd century, but really what the Navy were thinking of was, late 20th century or early 21st century, that the Navy space program would actually be revealed, and we would suddenly find out that the U.S. Navy actually has space fleets, that Star Trek is not science fiction, that it actually exists. Yep. What hasn't happened is that we just haven't been told. We've just been told that NASA is all there is when it comes to space, but there's much more than that. So the military want this because the idea of Star Trek and the Federation of Planets, that is very compatible with the military mindset, because if you look at the Star Trek series, it's very hierarchical. It's all based on Starfleet, which is run by these groups of admirals, and it's all Navy-based. So when you look at Star Trek, you got to think in terms of how the U.S. Navy idealized itself in terms of using these advanced space technologies for the future. So that for the Navy, Star Trek is its positive version of its positive view of itself. So this is what the Navy wants. This is what the U.S. Marine Corps wants. This is what the Army wants. And the Air Force are playing catch up, because they're kind of caught between, what could have been and what really is at the moment. But certainly Star Trek is the model that the Navy and the Marine Corps want to be established as disclosure moves forward, and Trump is the man to make it happen. That's why he's being supported by Navy and the Marine Corps and the Army. If you look at his the people around him, they're all Marines, U.S. Marine Corps or Army.
So how do you see that unfolding? How is Trump this card that's going to make it happen?
Well, it's already begun. One of the first things he did when he became president was that he issued a secret memorandum where he called for over 1,000 secret patents, or patents whose applications had been stopped due to secrecy orders. He ordered for these to be declassified and the patents to be issued. And these 1,000 patents deal with the issues that the different space program whistleblowers have discussed. They concern kind of like anti-aging, curing disease, free energy technologies, material sciences, where you could build incredibly strong kind of exteriors for craft using very lightweight material and so forth. So this memorandum has been issued by Trump, and it actually in the inauguration, Trump actually hinted at this. I mean, one of the sentences in his inauguration speech, he basically talked about his vision of what he was planning to do. And this is what he said, quote, "We stand at the birth of a new millennium, ready to unlock the mysteries of space, to free the Earth from the miseries of disease, and to harness the energies, industries, and technologies of tomorrow." End quote. So that was Donald Trump in the inauguration, right? So he is articulating his vision, and this vision comes right out of this kind of Star Trekian worldview of the Navy, that once all these technologies are released, we are going to be living in a Star Trek society. So this is the plan, and Trump has ordered the military to do this within the next 2 to 3 years, so that by the beginning of Trump's second inauguration, a lot of these technologies are going to be released. A lot of these secret patents will be made available, and then you're going to have this renaissance of American industry. You're going to have millions of Americans going back to these, being involved in these huge manufacturing projects, building new space battle groups, building new cars that can fly, from city to city, to build aircraft where, Boeing builds kind of aircraft that uses anti-gravity, where now you can do a trip to the moon and back as a space tourist. That by Trump's second term, this is what he is planning, is that by 2020, that we are already well on the way to becoming a Star Trek society, so that by the end of his administration, we will have a Star Trek society. That's the plan.
Wow.
So in this Star Trekian society, though, it'll still be militaristic. So there's two aspects of Star Trek there, and they've explored this in great depth. And we watched all the episodes of all the series. We sat down and did it systematically as an examination of this subculture. Plus, I was a Trekkie back when I was 12 years old in 1966. What it shows is there's a part of it that is out there to do exploration, and they're a peaceful scientific expedition, and the other part is militaristic. Do you see them continuing? Is there like this ongoing Star Wars type thing continually in the galaxy, or has it calmed down to some? Yeah, tell us what you know.
Well, yeah, this is the thing about Star Trek, the series, that it is very much a kind of fusion of these two ideals. One is the kind of peaceful explorer of the cosmos thesis of just being scientists out there to do this, and the other theme is this kind of national security mindset where there are threats out in space, and you need to be able to deal with these threats, develop alliances, develop offensive technologies. And throughout the Star Trek series, you could see this constant battle between those two ideals as it played out in the different series, the original Star Trek, or maybe not so much the original Star Trek, but certainly Star Trek The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, the Voyager series, and so forth, and even with the reboot that's happening now, that you have this kind of tension between these two ideals. And I think this is what's going to happen for the future, that we're going to have this kind of technology released, but it's going to be done very much in the mold of a kind of Star Trekian world or universe, where it's like, there's so many worlds out there to explore, and we're peaceful explorers, but we're going to carry a big stick with us just in case someone kind of snarls at us. Then we'll have that big stick. So I think this is going to be really the way in which we kind of grow into a major space power, where we're going to have both aspects of that kind of peaceful explorer, but also that kind of militaristic, we've got a big stick that we'll use if you cross us worldview.
Do you have to lower your shield before you can fire?
You know how in Star Trek trauma, you have to lower your shield before you can fire. We don't know the specific, but that is a good question. What is actually going on out there? Are there continual battles? Who are the forces fighting these battles? I have a female friend that was in the secret military space program, and she was in a large, there were a 5-craft fleet outside of Mars, keeping out of sight so that we couldn't see it from the Earth. And she said that it's predominantly peaceful, but they are watching the stargates, the portals, because there are species that are basic planet killers that come through and wipe out whole planets and leave everybody dead, and they just take all the mineral resources, things they want. What is actually going on there based on what Corey Good and all the other people are revealing? Is it continual wars, or is there some kind of level of peace?
Well, there's a lot of tension at the moment in terms of what's happening in space around us. That there have been some serious conflicts. That at the moment the Cabal, the Illuminati, their bases of power are slowly being taken out. And so you're having the kind of the military special forces guys going in and taking over these former Cabal bases. So there is a lot of kind of conflict that's happening behind the scenes that just isn't announced publicly. The public are kind of like kept in the dark on all of this. And as far as the extraterrestrials are concerned, they are also in this situation of an uneasy peace, that the reptilians and the kind of Nordic civilizations that are kind of in our solar system are kind of trapped behind a quarantine, and so they're having to kind of like deal with their kinds of issues. So there's a lot of tension. there are occasional flare-ups, but no major wars at the moment, which kind of like reflects the planet in a way, kind of like as above, so below. We do have pockets of wars. We have wars in Syria, and we have kind of like civil wars in parts of Africa. But elsewhere around the planet, there's a lot of tension in certain countries. But predominantly, most of the people on the planet, probably 95% of the planet's population, live in peaceful circumstances where they're not worried that someone's going to break through their door and demand to see their papers to make sure that they're not the wrong ethnic group or the wrong religious group or whatever. And it's as above, so below. So that with the extraterrestrials and the different space programs, there is predominantly stable relationships at the moment, but there are kind of pockets of wars or conflict happening. And so, that's as much as I know about that.
Your question?
Just this thing about slavery, because from my perspective, when nations draft people to work in industry supporting a war or to fight in a war, that is one of the grossest forms of slavery imaginable. And so I don't think that the Western powers that use financial slavery and conscription are free of slavery at all. That's just the way I look at it. And that is a blight to the whole. It's the hierarchic thinking which makes some consciousnesses think they're worth more because of their bloodline or some thing that exalts them and puts others down, which I think is a great mistake. And ignoring the contributions of the various lights that everybody can shine on our evolving universes.
I agree with you entirely there, Sasha. Yes, and slavery is a big problem. And it doesn't just happen in space. It happens also on our planet Earth, as we know. It's a very sad story how people, even today, are still caught up in this kind of human trafficking. But it's very interesting that this is one of the things that Trump has made a major policy issue for him, to stop human trafficking in all its forms. He's issued a presidential memorandum, and he's really wanting to kind of like stop that from happening, because yes, this is a big problem, and I think this is one of the things that the white hats in the secret space programs want to stop. That they realize that if you're going to stop slavery in space, you have to stop kind of slavery on the planet Earth, and so Trump is doing that. And so as he moves forward with that agenda, then they'll be able to do the same thing in space.
Wow, thank you.
So what does Corey Goode bring to the table? What's some of the information he's revealing that we need to know about what's going on?
Well, Corey's information is very important because he seems to be this unique figure at this point in our history where he is given access to these very high-level negotiations that are being conducted by the different extraterrestrial factions and the different space programs and the cabal, the Illuminati. That Corey Goode, because he was chosen by this group of extraterrestrials called the Sphere Being Alliance to be their delegate, that essentially they would represent him at all of these high-level negotiations between these different groups. That Corey has been given access to information that normally we in the private sector have no clue about. And the different factions are allowing this, or reluctantly, because the Sphere Being Alliance is very powerful and has created this solar system-wide quarantine. So everyone has to pay attention to them, but no one can talk directly to the Sphere Being Alliance. All they can do is contact Corey Goode and say, hey, Corey, tell your people in the Sphere Being Alliance that, we want this or we want that. So that's elevated Corey into this unique position where he's given information about what's really going on around the planet. And so Corey continues to have encounters with groups of inner Earth civilizations. These are beings that have been here for millions of years, that they represent the pure human bloodlines, that they represent the original Earthlings or the original humans on this planet who had to go underground to escape ancient cataclysms. And that around 500,000 years ago, after another set of cataclysms, then extraterrestrials started showing up and started to genetically alter the DNA of the surface humanity. And so everyone on this planet, on the surface of the planet, is an extraterrestrial hybrid. We're a result of extraterrestrials creating distinct genetic subgroups, racial subgroups on our world. And I know you know this because of the Anunnaki material, but that the inner Earth beings, they pride themselves on maintaining their pure Earth bloodlines. And they also know how to use the ancient builder race technology. And this is technology that is hundreds of millions, if not billions of years old. Kind of similar to in the Stargate series. Stargate is really a form of soft disclosure because it has so much information in there that is very accurate about what has been happening. And in the Stargate series, you had the kind of the ancients, the technology of the ancients, that the Stargates were technologies built by the ancients. Well, similarly, according to Corey and these inner Earth beings, what they're telling him, that these builder race technologies have been around for hundreds of millions of years and originally secured peace in our region of the galaxy, in our local star cluster of 50 star systems, and that but that because of the wars in our solar system, that the ancient builder race technologies that secured the peace were basically deactivated, and so a lot were kind of destroyed. Some were just cannibalized. Others are hidden. A few are still in use, but that these inner Earth civilizations kind of like know the history of our planet and our solar system quite intimately, and they've been sharing some of that information with Corey. One of the things that he shared, which I find fascinating, again, it kind of matches up with what we're told in the Stargate series, is that he says that just outside our solar system, because our solar system is part of a local star cluster of 50 star systems. So our star system is right in the center of that cluster of 50 star systems. And just outside of our solar system is a major jump gate, which can be used to travel between galaxies. And so this is something that's very rare. And it's kind of like in the series Deep Space Nine, again, Star Trek kind of like alludes to this. In the series Deep Space Nine, the planet Bajor is us. That's the thing. We're the Bajorans. We're the Bajorans, and the reptilians. The reptilians are the Cardassians, and the Nordics are the Federation. And that jump gate in that series, or that wormhole just near the planet Bajor, basically puts it on the galactic map, and everyone wants to kind of come and control that part of the solar system. And so we are in a very similar situation. And Deep Space Nine, when you look at all of the elements, it really was created to accurately depict where we are as a planet in terms of our evolution as a galactic civilization.
Wow! And they show the threat of getting to a singularity that's run by the Cylon artificial intelligence. Woo!
So that was Battlestar Galactica. That's another whole story.
That's right.
I wanted to ask you a couple questions. So I have two questions. Why Corey Good? Why is he the chosen one? And the second one is, can the inner Earth beings breed with Homo sapiens sapiens?
Okay. Yeah, really interesting questions. Why was Corey chosen?
Yes.
He's not a very spiritual person, as he himself acknowledges. He's just a very ordinary guy, as we would say in Australia. He's just a good bloke. That's all he is. He's a good bloke. He's a very decent man, very kind of compassionate, and he's had these extraordinary experiences. So for some reason he was chosen, and maybe it's because he's not an intellectual. He's not someone that is into the kind of new age, community. He's someone that most people can easily identify with, because he is such a common, decent human being. I think that might have a lot to do with why he was chosen. And we know that he worked on the secret space programs, so that's another factor here, because of those experiences. It meant that he would not be traumatized as he was exposed to all of these different extraterrestrial groups and all of these different space factions, because he had already been exposed to it during his military service on the secret space programs from 1987 to 2007, so that by the time the Sphere Being Alliance kind of chose him as their delegate in March of 2015, he had already had a lot of experiences. So he kind of brought together, this really incredible wealth of experiences with off-world civilizations and different space programs, with this very common touch of someone that is very anchored in his local community, in his family, and can empathize with people. As for your second question, Janet, can these inner Earth beings kind of interbreed with surface humanity? I believe they can. Yes, I haven't heard anything that they. And in fact, no. Corey has said that there have been quite a number of instances where these inner Earth beings, as a consequence of them interacting with surface humanity, that they fall in love and that they kind of give up life on the inner Earth, or they're expelled from life on the inner Earth because they've fallen in love with someone on the surface. And so, yes, that they're able to kind of interbreed with people. So, yes, that is definitely possible.
That's so romantic. I also have one more question, and let's see, we have about 10 minutes, maybe less. Grant Cameron was on last week, and he was talking about Trump. There's a portal, an interdimensional portal, and where was that? North Carolina or something like that, somewhere in the East Coast Atlantic, and Trump is going to go through it. And I don't know if you ever listened to Grant, but he's got a lot of information. Have you heard anything like that Trump has access to some...
is it an island off one of the Carolinas?
Yeah, off the Carolinas. Have you heard anything about that?
I've heard that there's roughly 30 portals around the planet, and that there are a number of these portals in the United States. Some are artificial, some are kind of natural portals. I don't know anything about Trump being given access to these portals to travel through them. I would have to look at where Grant got his information for that, but I don't know anything about it.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's something about the Tom DeLonge and Chris Bledsoe and all these different disclosure programs. He's Ron Pandolfi. He said there's like 9 different disclosure programs that are currently being explored, and one of them apparently was this portal. And one of his sources said that he heard that by a reliable source that Trump is aware of it and he's going to go through it, because other people have gone through it, but he's going to do it himself. So that, anyway, we'll track that up, and maybe we'll have a show on that. The two of you on sometime, you can compare notes, because you're both very detail-oriented researchers. Sasha, what would you like to say? We only have about 8 minutes. Come over here, honey, closer to the mic.
I just always come down to this, the other side of the disclosure, is how are you going to let these perps off without the people that are going after their blood for vengeance. And I guess that in one of the Corey Goode interviews, he's talking about Kissinger trying to negotiate a retreat for Rockefellers and Rothschilds, and then they're arguing about who's going to pay the damages to the victims. And so, gosh, he put the finger on Kissinger. I think that deserves a response.
It's interesting. I'd like to kind of see that exactly what it was that happened with Kissinger there. But I do know, as far as what's going to happen to the ruling elites as all of this is exposed. That's part of the kind of ascension event that we are in the midst of. That there have been a number of people that have talked about an ascension event where we are entering a region of the galaxy which accelerates frequencies to the extent that these tendencies within us become magnified. So, if you tend to be a compassionate, empathic person, as we enter into these into this region of the galaxy, then that's going to be heightened. You're going to be looking for more ways to help people and uplift people. If you're a kind of more a sociopath or someone that is very angry inside, then those qualities are going to come out more and more. And what Corey is saying is that the information he's getting from the Sphere Being Alliance is that all of these events that are unfolding now, the disclosures that are coming forward, the solar events that are going to be unleashed very soon, this kind of ascension event that's going to lead to all of these innate tendencies within us being magnified. He's saying it's really incumbent on us to kind of like really follow a path of forgiveness and reconciliation. That because all of those anyone that you feel has committed an injustice towards you, and that creates anger within you, then if you don't forgive that person, that's going to create a karmic link where you are going to connect with that person again and going to resolve that. So, the recommendation there is that, we really need to get into a place of, love and forgiveness. And really, as far as the elites are concerned, kind of like do something like what they did in South Africa with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Say to these people, look, if you tell us the truth about everything you did, then we'll give you amnesty. And that's it. You'll be able to kind of like go free, but everyone will know the truth. And so it becomes more of a kind of shaming process, because this is the thing that the elites fear most, is this kind of public shaming as the truth comes forward. And I think that that's in itself punishment enough, that we don't need to kind of hang them by the gallows or anything like that.
There's still beyond foregoing punishment and even begging the question of rehabilitation. We have the point of somehow uplifting the people that have been damaged and crippled and disadvantaged by the machinations of the cabal.
Yes, and one of the things that is always good to remember is that, in a traditional model of justice, which is called restorative justice, the perpetrator of any crime against the victim is obliged to help the victim. That, many of the perpetrators of the cabal, these are fabulously wealthy people, billionaires, so to atone for their crimes, they would have to spend their wealth on helping the victims of their crimes. And so that's a big part of restorative justice. Whereas with the punitive justice model of the West, putting these guys in jail, how does that help the victims? Sure, maybe they feel a sense of vengeance has been satisfied, but if you've lost a loved one, having these people atone for that through some actions where they use their resources to help restore the right, help to restore, what had been taken away, that is actually, I think, something that a lot of victims would prefer.
So what's going to happen to all these pedophiles? Any idea? They're going to get arrested? How do we protect the innocent people that are being enslaved and being used by these people?
Well, I think with a lot of these pedophiles, I mean, they're going to be exposed, and, I think the justice system will just play itself out with them. And, these are people that, I mean, truly, anyone to do that kind of thing, I mean, they're either deeply mentally disturbed or they've been brainwashed in some way. So, I think there are people who may have been brainwashed into thinking that somehow, abuse of children is okay in some level, that there's that kind of brainwashing is probably existing to a level. So maybe people who have suffered from that they can be rehabilitated. As for the psychopaths, as for those that, have done this, fully aware of what they were doing, I mean, for people like that, there really is no other way other than just incarcerating them. I just don't see how psychopaths can be truly reformed.
Well, it seems like they're required to do these heinous things in order to join the club and become rich and powerful and leaders. So that it seems that's part of the major structure. I just look at the time. We probably have just about a minute left or two. Would you like to tell us about how to get your books and where you're going to be, and especially Contact in the Desert?
Sure. Well, the best place to go is to get my material is my website, exopolitics.org. That's exopolitics.org. I've got over 600 articles there that are free, and people can read those. I've got some books that you can buy online, or you could from my website, or you can go to Amazon to buy the books. You can. I'll be appearing at Contact in the Desert in May, and a Mutual UFO Network conference in August.
Oh, excellent. I will see you at both of them. And thank you, listeners.
Yes. Hello.
The divine, the sacred.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message.
You need some more speed records in this day and age. You need coverage.
Coverage? Oh, you mean them little root weevils that crawl around popping off cameras in your face?
Those root weevils write history.
Many of you know that quote by Jack Nicholson and A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Well, you can, and Event Horizons will give you those truths. So when you're mad as hell and not going to take it anymore from that memorable CNN network, you'll know just what to do. We will draw you in and become your news addiction at Event Horizons.